It's been a while, YouTube, but Arcane is back and damn does it feel good. I did not make a video before Act 1 or Act 2, which many of you have pointed out, but fear not. I have one Arcane video for you before the end. And it's going to be a little bit different from other videos. So many other lore creators on YouTube are already doing such a good job of showing you every little detail that you may or may not have caught in these acts, and I'm just not gonna do as good of a job as they are. I barely consider myself a lore guy anyway. I'm more of like a world traveler when it comes to runeterra that knows some lore stuff as a result of travel in the world or whatever. So instead of giving you a detailed video, I'm gonna give you a fortune-telling video. I'm going to use my knowledge of the lore and the arcane to try and predict where Act 3 is going to end, and consequently where Arcane is going to end. And it'll touch on the stuff that I'm specifically going to look for in Act 3. And please note that a lot of it is going to be theory and well, really all of it is going to be theory and speculation. And there's going to be some extrapolation of existing lore to get there. None of this is fact, and don't take it as such. Especially the very bold dark horse prediction that I have coming. Also, there are spoilers in this video. Don't watch this if you haven't watched Arcane, especially if you haven't watched Arcane Season 2. I feel like I don't have to say that, but you know, just in case. As always, if you like this video, consider liking, subscribing, leaving a comment down below. You can comment whatever you want. You can write papaya down there for all I care. Any engagement just helps the channel a ton. My life has been really busy lately and I have truly missed making content, but you have all motivated me to get back on the horse, so thank you for that. Except the guy who said my voice makes him realize why people use AI voice. Honestly, a sick burn though, I can't fault you there for that. All right, here we go. You know, when I started Season 2, I thought to myself, I don't think they're gonna do any timey-wimey bullshit, or at least not that much timey-wimey bullshit this season. Part of it was just wishful thinking. I think that a lot of the time travel stuff falls flat, but I also just didn't think they were gonna need it that much. And then we got through Act 1 and two things happened. The first is a little bit more about the nature of what the show is calling the Arcane, which I'm going to come back to in a second. And the second is us watching Heimer and Jayce and Ekko experience, based on what Jayce goes through for the rest of Act 2, what looks like an awful lot of timey-wimey bullshit. This magical interaction they have feels a lot like them splitting and experiencing different timelines. And then in Act 2, no discernible presence from Ekko in any way. Now, it's been obvious since Season 1 that at some point we were going to see Ekko get the Z-Drive. For those unfamiliar, the Z-Drive is Ekko's piece of machinery that he uses to manipulate and mess with different streams of time. But now it seems like the obvious catalyst for the Z-Drive is going to be whatever future Ekko and Jayce and Heimer experience. One that I suspect ties heavily into the void, as we'll get to in a second. This is a hard video to split up. I feel like Charlie Day in Always Sunny with the red threads. Two things are possible here to me. One is that we're going to get an Avengers-style mission that has Ekko, Heimerdinger, and Jayce all going to different points in time to try and stop whatever world-ending threat they see in the future. A disastrous future that I might add, I think is going to be literally the opening scene of Act 3. But the second possibility, and one that I would say isn't even really a possibility, is more of a certainty, is what leads to Jayce coming back in time to kill Viktor in Act 2. And that's why I put Jayce and Ekko together for this section. It feels very clear to me visually that the Jayce that we get in Act 2 is not the Jayce that disappeared in Act 1. I don't necessarily mean that they're different people, I just mean that, like, this Jayce has seen some shit in Act 2. They're very clearly signaling this with a detail used since time immemorial, the time traveler's beard. But I think the actual most clear one is the appearance of his hammer and the hextech crystal embedded in his wrist. This is a hammer that looks like it has been thoroughly corrupted by the organic techno look that occupies all of Viktor's commune. So this Jayce, either our original Jayce or a Jayce that has come from an alternate timeline, I don't think it's a distinction that necessarily matters, has obviously seen a world where Viktor's hive mind cult of the gloriously evolved has hit a critical mass and likely taken over the entire world. And I think Act 3 is going to start with an explanation of that timeline and universe and how Jayce got back here to warn Vi and Caitlyn and Jinx about the void. Yeah, the Void. In my How Do We Merge Arcane Back into the Canyon Universe video from a while back, which I think is actually still worth watching, I'll link it somehow, I talk a little bit about my theories on why the corruption force that we're seeing in Arcane Season 1 likely is the Void. And as much as I think it'd be really interesting actually to chase the non-Void theories of corruption, I just feel like there's too much evidence at this point for it to be anything else. It's too visually similar to the Void we see throughout the rest of runeterra lore. There's way too much emphasis on purple. But the thing that absolutely convinced me of this is the scene where Viktor talks through Sallow hive mind style. Hive minding is a good old property of the Void, and as soon as that scene happened, my brain locked in and said, okay, they are definitely just doing the Void for the rest of the show. The nature of the Void appearing in Arcane is interesting. The further we go in the season, the more it seems like they're setting up this corrupting force. And I know it might not actually end up being the Void, but for the sake of conversation, I'm just going to keep calling it that, as a sort of natural opposing force to the quote-unquote Arcane. Something interesting to note, and maybe post Act 3 it'll be worth making a video about all this, is that of all the types of magic we've seen like categorized in runeterra canon before, Arcane has never been one of them. That's relatively new verbiage. However, as we see throughout the show, the magic that Arcane is chiefly referencing and that hextech utilizes is very much runic magic. And that is magic that we're a little more familiar with in the previous canon state. Runic magic was considered to be a combination of elemental and, most importantly to my next point, celestial magic. Elemental is pretty straightforward to understand, but celestial is what I want to hone in on for a second. Runeterra's origins, traditionally, are steeped in magic. It goes back to the creation of the world using the world runes. And runeterra sort of ends up sitting in between this conflict of like the celestial forces of creation and the consumptive oppositional forces of the Void. And you got runeterra in the middle. This is a good diagram with my hands. So while it's been posited online in some places that Arcane is a new concept being introduced, I think it's actually probably just a redefinition and repositioning of our previous understanding of celestial magic. And I think the show is already starting to show with the Black Rose and some of that stuff that there are other versions of magic as well. But this interpretation in particular sort of cements that the oppositional force that is controlling Viktor at this point that we're seeing is the Void. Also, Viktor just ends up in like void space for a lot of these scenes. It's a very obvious visual tell, I feel. Anyways, all of this leads me to my most outlandish long shot prediction. Sort of the reason I made the whole video, to be honest. I think everyone should get at least one prediction that they know in their heart can't possibly be true, but they have it anyway. And this is gonna be mine. We know there's time travel shenaniganry about to take, you know what, actually already taking place with Ekko, Heimerdinger, and Jayce. And I feel confident saying that the influence that we're seeing as a corruptive force is in fact the Void, a Void that is being introduced in the show as a world-ending threat. I think there's a surprise character that's about to make an appearance in Arcane that Riot has kept under wraps, because it would be insane for this character to show up. Someone who is very, very familiar with the damage that the Void can cause. Because assuming Arcane is taking place after the Rune Wars, which still feels like a safe assumption, the Void has already impacted runeterra several times in history. Someone who has navigated the time stream from beginning to end, searching for ways to keep the Void at bay and even undo some of the damage that it's done, which is what Jayce appears to be doing as well. That's right, folks. I think Act 3 is time for Zilean. For those unfamiliar with runeterra lore, because there are a lot of you watching this video, Zilean is a mage from a region called Acathia, which is south of present-day Piltover. I have a short on the fall of Acathia, but suffice to say, in order to combat the ruling Shuriman Empire at the time, Acathia is a region that turned to the use of the Void, and it had devastating results. Zilean, trying to save as many people as he could while the Void consumed all of Acathia, ushered people into a tower, and then removed the tower from time. Since then, he has journeyed back and forth across the timeline, seeing a world-ending threat and seeking to prevent that world-ending threat, specifically against the Void. It perfectly aligns with what I think Jayce's goals are. So I am boldly predicting that one, if not all three, of our trio is going to encounter Zilean, and that it is going to push forward the entire plot of Act 3. Is this a long shot prediction? You bet it is. It would be insane for this to be true, but I'm willing to believe. I just looked at my recording time and I accidentally spent a lot longer on this than I thought I was going to, so let's hit some other points about Act 3 really fast. This has been a wildcard plot for me this whole season, but massive shout out to the guy in my comment section on I think the Black Rose short I made like 2 years ago who called this shot. I've seen people going back into those comments to give this guy accolades and he deserves it. I think there's a possibility that we could see Swain presence in Act 3, but I actually think it's a slim one. I do think, however, that Ambessa is not acting entirely rogue from the Noxian Empire. Keep in mind that while Ambessa does have her own goals and ambitions, she did install Mel into Piltover. And even before Hextech, there are good reasons Noxus would want control in Piltover. It's essential for trade and travel to be able to pass goods and, military stuff from east to west Valoran. So Ambessa, and whoever the Emperor of Noxus is at this time, because keep in mind, the timeline is murky, being aligned politically makes sense to me. And when Ambessa references the war brewing in Noxus in Season 1, she could mean between Swain and Black Rose, who are not on the same page. But depending on where this sits on the timeline, I think this could be referencing Black Rose getting ready to unseat Borum Darkwill, the previous Emperor of Noxus. That plot eventually leads to Swain taking control of Noxus. I'm having a hard time deciding what I think is more likely, but I think I'm starting to lean towards the latter option. Especially given the Singed of it all, Ambessa's relationship with Singed can bring Singed into the Noxian fold, and then he would go to Noxus, and post-Arcane, he would develop the weapons tech that is then used in the Ionia War. And the Ionia War initially happens with Darkwill at the head of the Empire. It sort of depends on how late in the new unified canon timeline Riot wants hextech to be invented. Either way, I think the only prediction I feel truly safe about here is that Ambessa is going to die. I also actually think we might not have an inkling of what the Black Rose's true intentions with Mel are by the end of the season, even though the show is ending. I think they'll try and wrap the plot up in an okay way, but they might leave that one hanging for future stories in Runeterra. Heimerdinger's on the chopping block, folks. I think he might just end up dead. I'm not really sure how, I'm not even sure why. This section's gonna be less than a minute. I have nothing more than a feeling that as part of the time manipulation that's going to happen, Heimerdinger is gonna get sacked in some way. Maybe it's the Void, maybe it's just a casualty of time stuff, but I think he's going to die and he's gonna get a nice statue in Piltover. In traditional canon, Yordles have an extremely hard time dying anyways, so maybe he's just going back to Bandle City. You can all take that and hold that for some comfort if you want. At the end of Act 2, I think Isha's sacrifice is going to be the catalyst to fully Warwick Vander. So I think we're going to get full Wolf Warwick by the end of the show, and it's going to take Vi, Jinx, and Caitlyn to take him down. While also fighting off Noxus, because I think part of the plot is going to be that Noxus doesn't actually care about the consuming threat, and just Ambessa wants the power of the Void to combat the Black Rose. I actually don't have a bunch of predictions about big world impacting stuff from Vi, Warwick, Caitlyn, and Jinx though. I think Vi and Caitlyn probably end up going back to the surface together. Jinx ends up still being a figurehead hero for the now tenuous Zaunites. And Warwick either dies or runs off to become Blood Batman in Zaun for some time. That's really all I'm going to go over today. In confession, I mostly made this video because I really wanted to say the Zillion thing out loud, even though it's definitely not going to happen. But all in all, I've been really happy with the first 2 acts of Arcane. I have pretty strong confidence that they're going to wrap up the show in a very compelling way. And watching it has made me really excited for what the future of the canon is going to be. I know not everybody feels the same way. Feel free to drop your thoughts politely in the comments down below. It's been just nice to talk about Runeterra lore to the camera again. So thank you all for watching if you got this far. I'm excited to watch Act 3, and we'll do a fun little post-mortem after Saturday when we know where everything stands. Okay.